Marcus had never imagined that one day his life would be threatened in a way he couldn't understand. He had always thought that danger was something out there, something in the past. But on a peaceful, seemingly normal day, everything changed. Marcus lived on a small colony planet, far from the chaotic wars that seemed to have plagued so many other parts of the galaxy. The colony was quiet, peaceful, and safe. A perfect place for Marcus and his wife, Nyx, to build a life. Nyx was unlike anyone Marcus had ever met. She wasn't from Earth, not even from his galaxy. Nyx was an alien, a warrior from a distant star system. But despite their differences, they shared a bond that Marcus never thought possible. Nyx's warrior instincts were sharp, her strength unmatched, and her love for Marcus was unwavering. They had met years ago when Nyx had come to Earth for a peace mission. She had been assigned to protect humanity from an incoming alien threat. But during her time on Earth, she had become fascinated by the human spirit and Marcus in particular. Over time, their friendship blossomed into something more, and now, years later, they were married, living quietly on the colony. It was a regular afternoon when everything started. Marcus was in the market, picking up some supplies for dinner. The small marketplace was filled with the usual bustling activity, people bargaining, vendors calling out their wares, and children running around. He had just picked up a bundle of fruit when he felt a strange presence. He turned and saw a group of 4 figures approaching. They were not local. Marcus immediately noticed their unusual clothing, which seemed alien and unfamiliar. His instinct told him that something was wrong. Before he could even make sense of it, the group surrounded him. The leader, a tall figure wearing a dark cloak, stepped forward. His face was hidden behind a helmet, but his eyes glowed with an unnatural light, a sharp red hue that seemed to pierce right through Marcus. The man's voice was cold, almost robotic as he spoke. "We've been looking for you, human." Marcus's heart raced. He hadn't done anything wrong, so why was this group targeting him? Before he could respond, the figure continued. "You possess something that doesn't belong to you, a piece of technology, an artifact. And you will hand it over to us. Now." Marcus's mind raced. Artifact? What were they talking about? He had no idea what they meant, but his instincts told him that whatever it wasn't something he wanted to be involved with. He shook his head, his voice shaky but firm. "I don't have anything. I don't know what you're talking about." The figure's eyes narrowed. "You do, and if you refuse, we will take it from you, by force if necessary." Marcus could feel his hands trembling as he realized the danger he was in. The group wasn't just threatening him with words, they had weapons, and from the way they moved, he could tell they were trained. One of them stepped forward, his hand resting on a weapon that looked like a blaster, the barrel glowing faintly. "I don't have it," Marcus repeated, his voice more desperate now. "Please, I don't know anything about this artifact." The man in the cloak made a slow, deliberate motion, and before Marcus could react, a sharp pain shot through his side. One of the attackers had slashed at him with a blade, leaving a deep gash. Marcus staggered, falling to one knee, his vision blurring. He gasped for air, feeling the blood drain from his body, but the threat didn't stop there. "You're wasting time, human," the leader said. "Tell us where it is." Just as Marcus felt the cold hand of fear wrap around his chest, he heard a faint noise. It was like the rush of wind, a sound almost too fast for him to comprehend. Then, in a blink of an eye, the attackers were thrown back with incredible force. The one who had slashed Marcus was knocked aside as if he were nothing but a rag doll. Marcus barely had time to look up when he saw Nyx standing before him. She was a vision of strength and grace, her eyes flashing with the fury of a warrior protecting her loved one. She moved like a blur, her alien combat training kicking in. Her body was a perfect blend of power and agility, each movement precise and calculated. The attackers didn't stand a chance. With a swift motion, Nyx disarmed the one closest to her. The blaster fell to the ground, but Nyx didn't waste a second. She grabbed the attacker by the throat, lifting him off the ground as if he were weightless. Her voice was calm, but it held an edge of danger that sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. "Touch him again," she warned, "and you'll regret it." The leader of the group didn't seem intimidated by Nyx's presence. Instead, he raised his hand, signaling for the others to regroup. Nyx didn't wait for them to make a move. She was already in the air, using her alien strength to flip over the leader and strike him from behind. In seconds, the entire group was incapacitated, lying on the ground, either unconscious or severely wounded. Marcus watched in awe as Nyx turned to him. Her expression softened as she kneeled beside him, her hand gently resting on his wound. "Marcus," she whispered, "you're hurt. We need to get you out of here." But Marcus was too dazed to respond. His world was spinning, and the pain from his wound was overwhelming. He had never been in a situation like this before. He had always relied on Nyx to protect him, but now he could see how much danger they were really in. Whoever these attackers were, they were not ordinary enemies. They were after something much bigger, something that could destroy everything. Nyx lifted Marcus carefully, cradling him in her arms as if he weighed nothing. Her strength was incredible, and Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with gratitude. She was his protector, his partner, and she had just saved his life. But even in the midst of his pain, Marcus couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this attack was just the beginning. As Nyx rushed him back to their home, Marcus tried to make sense of everything. Who were these people? What did they want from him? And why were they willing to kill for it? He had no answers, only questions, and the uncertainty was almost as painful as the wound on his side. But one thing was clear: their lives were about to change forever. Whoever was behind this attack wasn't going to stop. They had just started a fight that would take them to the edge of the galaxy and beyond. Marcus wasn't sure if they were ready for what was coming, but he knew one thing for certain. With Nyx by his side, he was going to face whatever came next with everything he had. Nyx could feel the tension in the air as she carried Marcus home. She was strong, unyielding, but the gravity of the situation was weighing on her. She didn't know who was behind the attack or what they wanted, but she knew that it was only a matter of time before they would be back, stronger, angrier, and more determined than ever. As she entered their home, she placed Marcus gently on their bed and began to tend to his wound. The room was silent, but both of them knew that silence wouldn't last. The battle had just begun. Marcus slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the dull light that filled the room. His head felt heavy, and his side burned with pain. He winced, trying to shift in the bed, but immediately regretted it. The wound was deeper than he had realized, and even the slightest movement sent a wave of discomfort through his body. His breathing was shallow, and his vision swam in and out of focus. "Marcus, you need to stay still." Nyx's voice was calm but firm. She had been by his side ever since she had carried him back to their home, tending to his injuries with the precision of someone who had seen battle far too many times. Her hands were gentle as she adjusted the bandages around his side, but there was an intensity in her eyes, a look that told Marcus that things were far from over. He groaned softly, looking up at her. Nyx was standing beside the bed, her figure strong and graceful as always. Her expression was serious, but her worry was unmistakable. Marcus could see it in the tightness of her jaw and the way her brow furrowed as she looked down at him. "What happened?" Marcus croaked, his voice rough from the strain. "Who were they? Why did they attack us?" Nyx didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood for a moment, looking out the window as if she were searching for something in the distance. The silence between them stretched on, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Nyx spoke, her voice low and measured. "They were mercenaries hired by someone. They're after something. Something I should have protected long ago." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean? What are they after?" Nyx turned back to him, her eyes dark with a hint of something that Marcus couldn't quite place. "The artifact," she said. "It's an ancient piece of technology, something that could change everything. I was part of a team tasked with guarding it, but it was stolen. I failed, and now it seems someone else wants it." Marcus's mind was racing. He tried to sit up again, but Nyx gently pushed him back down. "Rest, Marcus, you need to heal." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. "What is this artifact? Why do they want it so badly?" Nyx's gaze softened, but the seriousness remained in her eyes. "It's powerful, Marcus. Far more powerful than anything you can imagine. It can alter the fabric of space itself. If used incorrectly, it could tear apart the very fabric of reality." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The idea of such power in the wrong hands was terrifying. But there was something else in Nyx's voice, something that told him this wasn't just about the artifact. She had a personal stake in this, and he could feel it. "What happened to your team?" Marcus asked, his voice quiet. Nyx hesitated, her eyes distant as if the memory was painful to recall. "I don't know. I lost track of them after the artifact was stolen. We were separated, and I've been searching for it ever since." Marcus could see the weight of guilt in her expression. He reached out, touching her hand gently. "It's not your fault, Nyx. You did everything you could." Nyx didn't respond right away. She only nodded slowly, as if trying to convince herself of the same thing. She had always been strong, always in control, but in that moment Marcus could see that she was shaken. This wasn't just another mission for her. This was personal. "What now?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the lingering pain in his side. Nyx's gaze hardened, the warrior within her awakening. "Now we finish this. We find the artifact before they do, and we make sure it's safe. I won't let anyone use it to destroy everything we've built." Marcus could sense the determination in her words, and despite the fear gnawing at his insides, he found strength in her resolve. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. He had to stand by her no matter what came next. Over the next few days, Nyx worked tirelessly to gather information. She contacted old allies, pieced together fragments of intelligence, and scoured every corner of the galaxy that might hold a clue about the artifact's location. All the while, Marcus rested, his body still weak from the injury, but his mind was alert. He had never seen Nyx so focused, so driven. It was as if every part of her being was consumed by the need to find the artifact and stop the enemies who wanted it. During this time, Marcus couldn't help but think about the mercenaries. He had seen their leader's red, glowing eyes, the cold menace in his voice. They weren't just hired guns. They were part of something much larger, something that Marcus couldn't yet understand. But he would. He had to. One evening, as Nyx sat across from him, scanning a star map, Marcus spoke up. "Who are they, Nyx? The ones who hired the mercenaries? Do you know who's behind this?" Nyx didn't look up from the map. "I have a few ideas," she said, her voice tight. "But they're all dangerous, Marcus. Whoever is behind this, they're powerful. They have resources, influence. We'll have to be careful." Marcus nodded, absorbing her words. He wasn't naive enough to think this would be easy. He knew they were up against forces far greater than anything he could handle alone. But with Nyx by his side, he had a chance. They had a chance. The next morning, Nyx received a message from one of her old contacts, a former ally who had once helped her during her missions. The message was brief but urgent. The artifact had been located. It was on a distant planet, heavily guarded by a private army. It wouldn't be easy to get to, but it was their best lead yet. Nyx wasted no time. She prepared their ship, gathering the necessary supplies for the journey ahead. Marcus, still not fully healed, insisted on accompanying her. He wasn't about to let her face whatever was coming alone. Despite her protests, Nyx eventually relented, knowing that Marcus's presence would give her strength. The flight to the planet was long, and Marcus spent most of it resting, but his mind never fully left the danger that awaited them. They were about to confront the very people who had tried to kill him, and the people who had taken something so powerful that it could change everything. When they finally arrived, the planet was nothing like they had imagined. It was a barren world, covered in rocky terrain and harsh winds. The facility where the artifact was held was an imposing fortress, guarded by heavily armed soldiers. There was no easy way in. Nyx and Marcus surveyed the area from a distance, formulating a plan. It would be risky, but it was their only option. They had no choice but to infiltrate the facility and retrieve the artifact before it fell into the wrong hands. As Nyx began to suit up in her combat gear, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the woman beside him. She was a force of nature, a warrior who had seen and done things that Marcus could barely comprehend. But she wasn't just a warrior, she was also his wife. And as they stood together ready to face whatever awaited them, Marcus knew that he would follow her into any battle, no matter the cost. "We'll get through this," Nyx said, her voice steady and calm. "Together," Marcus nodded, "together." And with that, they set off towards the fortress, ready to face their enemies and the unknown dangers that lay ahead. Their journey was far from over, but Marcus knew that no matter what happened, he wasn't alone. Nyx was with him, and together they would find the artifact and protect it, no matter the cost. Nyx and Marcus stood on the edge of the rocky cliff, staring out at the fortress below. The wind howled through the desolate landscape, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. The facility was an imposing structure, its walls high and reinforced with layers of steel. It seemed impenetrable, a fortress built for war, not for the faint of heart. Nyx's eyes scanned the area, analyzing the layout of the facility. She had been in situations like this before, but there was something different about this one. The stakes were higher. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. And she wasn't going to let anyone stand in the way of stopping the destruction that the artifact could cause. "We'll need to approach from the east," Nix said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "There's a ventilation shaft we can use to sneak inside. It won't be easy, but it's our best shot." Marcus nodded, his gaze following hers. He was still recovering from the wound the mercenaries had inflicted on him, but his mind was sharp, and he wasn't going to let that stop him. He had seen Nix in action before, but this time, it was different. This time, they were going into enemy territory, and they were up against more than just a few mercenaries. They were up against a powerful organization with resources far beyond anything Marcus could comprehend. "We'll make it," Marcus said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We have to." Nix gave him a small smile, the briefest flicker of warmth in her eyes. "We will," she agreed. "But we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more time they have to prepare." They began their descent down the cliffside, careful not to make a sound. Nix led the way, her movements fluid and practiced, while Marcus followed closely behind, keeping an eye out for any signs of danger. Despite the silence, the tension between them was palpable. They were both fully aware of the risks they were taking. As they reached the base of the cliff, Nix motioned for Marcus to stay low. They crept toward the entrance of the ventilation shaft, which was hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Nix quickly checked for any guards nearby, then used a small device to disable the security system guarding the shaft. With a soft hiss, the metal grate slid open, revealing a dark tunnel. "After you," Nix said, her eyes scanning the surroundings once more. Marcus nodded, feeling a rush of adrenaline as he stepped into the shaft. The air inside was damp and musty, and the faint sound of distant machinery echoed through the narrow passage. It was cramped, but it would take them straight to the heart of the facility. Nix followed close behind, her footsteps silent on the metal floor. The journey through the shaft was slow and tense. The walls were narrow, and the air grew thicker as they moved deeper into the facility. Marcus tried to focus on the task at hand, but his mind kept drifting back to the events that had led them here. The attack on the marketplace, the mercenaries, the artifact, it all felt like a whirlwind that had swept them up and thrown them into a fight they weren't prepared for. But there was no turning back now. Nix's sharp voice broke through his thoughts. "We're almost there." "Stay alert," Marcus nodded, his hand instinctively reaching for the small weapon holstered at his side. The tunnel opened up into a large chamber, and they crouched behind a set of crates, watching the guards stationed around the perimeter. Nix's eyes flicked to Marcus, and she gave him a quick nod. They had practiced this many times before, sneaking past guards, using their surroundings to stay hidden. But this was different. This wasn't just about sneaking past. This was about getting the artifact and making sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. They waited for a few moments, watching the guards as they moved about their patrols. Nix gestured to Marcus, signaling that it was time to move. The two of them slipped from their hiding place, moving quickly and silently. Nix led the way, her movements swift and precise, while Marcus followed closely behind, doing his best to stay as quiet as possible. They made their way through the facility, carefully avoiding the guards and security cameras. The place was a maze of steel walls and cold concrete floors, and it felt like they were walking through a ghost town. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of machinery. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He knew they were getting closer to their goal, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they neared the central chamber where the artifact was supposedly kept, Nix stopped abruptly. She held up her hand, signaling for Marcus to stay still. They crouched behind a stack of crates, watching the heavily guarded door leading into the chamber. There were 4 guards standing watch, all armed and alert. Marcus's heart raced. There was no way they could get past them without being detected. Nix studied the guards for a moment, her mind working quickly. "We can't go through the front," she said. "We'll have to find another way in." Marcus's eyes scanned the room, looking for any possible way to break in. His gaze landed on a vent near the ceiling, and a plan started to form in his mind. "What about up there?" he asked, pointing to the vent. Nix followed his gaze and nodded. "It's a risk, but it's our best option." Together, they quickly moved toward the vent, using the shadows to stay hidden. Nix reached up and pulled the cover off, revealing the narrow shaft inside. She motioned for Marcus to go first, and without hesitation, he climbed up into the vent, followed closely by Nix. The vent was tight, and the air was even more suffocating than before. They crawled through the narrow passage, moving as quickly as possible to avoid detection. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached a small grate that opened into the central chamber. Nyx gave Marcus a quick look, then silently removed the grate. They slipped into the room, careful not to make a sound. The artifact was in the center of the room, surrounded by a protective barrier and guarded by a series of lasers. Nyx approached the artifact, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. Marcus stayed close behind, watching her every move. He had never seen her so focused, so determined. This was her mission, her responsibility, and she wasn't going to let anything stand in her way. She reached out, using a small device to disable the lasers around the artifact. With a soft beep, the barrier went down, and Nyx stepped forward, taking the artifact in her hands. It was a small, unassuming object, no bigger than a fist, but Marcus could feel the power radiating from it. He knew that this was the key to everything, the artifact that could change the course of history. Just as Nyx was about to turn to leave, a voice echoed through the chamber. "I see you found it." Nyx's eyes flashed with fury, and Marcus's heart skipped a beat. They had been caught. Standing in the doorway was the leader of the mercenaries, the one with the glowing red eyes. He smiled, his expression cold and calculating. "You should have known better than to think you could escape with it. This belongs to us now." Nyx stepped forward, her body tense and ready for a fight. Marcus's hand went to his weapon, but he knew this would be no easy battle. They had come this far, and they weren't about to let the artifact fall into the wrong hands. "We won't let you take it," Nyx said, her voice steady. "You'll have to kill us first." The mercenary leader's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. "If that's how it has to be," he said, drawing his weapon. The tension in the room was thick, and Marcus could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. This was it, the final confrontation. There was no turning back now. The room seemed to hold its breath as the mercenary leader's weapon hummed in the stillness. Nyx and Marcus stood face to face with their enemy, the artifact now securely in Nyx's hands. The mercenary leader's gaze was cold, calculating, as if he already knew how this would end. Marcus could feel the tension crackling in the air, thick and oppressive. He glanced at Nyx, her expression hard with determination. She wasn't going to let the artifact slip through their fingers now. They had come too far, faced too many dangers, and sacrificed too much. There was no turning back. "Step aside, Nyx," the mercenary leader said, his voice low and menacing. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. Hand over the artifact and you and your human can leave." Nyx didn't flinch. Her eyes locked with his, unyielding. "You think I'll just hand it over to you? After everything we've been through?" She took a step forward, her grip tightening on the artifact. "This isn't yours to take. You don't understand what you're dealing with." The leader's lips twisted into a smirk, but there was no humor in it. "You're not in a position to make demands, warrior. You're surrounded. Give it to me now, or I'll make sure you regret it." Nyx's eyes flicked to Marcus for the briefest moment, a silent exchange between them. They didn't need words to communicate. They both knew what had to be done. Nyx took another step forward, placing herself between Marcus and the leader, her body poised for the inevitable fight. The mercenary leader's hand twitched, his fingers resting on the trigger of his weapon. He didn't wait for Nyx to make her move. With a snap of his wrist, the first shot rang out. The beam of light flew toward them, but Nyx was faster. She leaped to the side, avoiding the blast with a fluid grace that only a warrior like her could achieve. The mercenary leader was quick to adjust, firing again, but Nyx was already on the move, using the shadows to her advantage. She darted across the room, her movements sharp and precise. Marcus moved to follow, but Nyx's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay back, Marcus. I've got this." Marcus hesitated, but he knew better than to argue. He watched as Nyx faced off against the leader, her every movement filled with purpose. She was a force of nature, a warrior unlike any other, and Marcus couldn't help but admire the strength that radiated from her. He had seen her fight before, but this was different. This was for everything they had fought for. The mercenary leader fired again, but Nyx was already closing the distance. She moved with the kind of speed that seemed almost unnatural, using the momentum of her leap to land behind him. Before he could react, Nyx disarmed him, her hand snaking around his wrist with lightning speed. The weapon dropped to the floor, useless in his hand. The leader grunted, twisting to free himself, but Nyx was relentless. She pulled him forward, driving her knee into his gut with a force that knocked the wind out of him. He stumbled back, struggling to regain his balance. "You're too slow," Nyx said, her voice cold. This ends now. Marcus watched in awe as Nyx took control of the fight. The leader was no match for her. He was slow, clumsy compared to her, and Nyx's training gave her an edge that no one could match. She pressed forward, a series of quick, decisive strikes sending the leader crashing to the ground. The room fell silent. The mercenary leader lay there, defeated and gasping for breath. Nyx stood over him, her chest heaving, but there was no triumph in her expression. There was only the calm of someone who had done what needed to be done. Marcus moved toward her, his hand resting on the artifact that she had kept so carefully hidden. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice quiet. Nyx nodded, but her eyes remained sharp. "For now, but this isn't the end, Marcus. We've only scratched the surface." Marcus frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "The people behind all of this, they'll come for us. They won't stop just because we've defeated one of their agents," Nyx explained, her tone grim. "The artifact is just a small part of a much larger scheme. We need to get it out of here before anyone else shows up." Marcus looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. They weren't done yet. This was just the beginning, but despite the danger, he felt a surge of pride. Nyx had stood her ground, protecting him and the artifact. He knew she was right. They couldn't afford to rest, not now, not when there was so much more at stake. "We'll do whatever it takes," Marcus said, determination in his voice. "We won't let them have it." Nyx gave him a small smile, the first soft expression he had seen from her in days. "That's the spirit." Together they made their way toward the exit, their eyes constantly scanning the shadows. The facility was still as silent as before, but Marcus knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. They had to move quickly. As they exited the building, the sun was beginning to set on the barren world. The orange glow of the dying light stretched across the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky landscape. The air was cold, but Marcus felt a warmth spreading through him. They had survived the fight, but the real battle was just beginning. Nyx led the way back to their ship, her movements steady and confident. Marcus followed closely behind, the artifact still in his hands. It felt heavy both physically and symbolically. They had taken it from the mercenaries, but now they had to keep it safe. And that wouldn't be easy. When they finally reached the ship, Nyx turned to Marcus, her face hardening once more. "We need to get this to the council. They'll know what to do with it." Marcus nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. The council. They were their last hope, but Marcus knew that getting there wouldn't be easy. The mercenaries were just one faction. Whoever was pulling the strings had the resources to track them across the galaxy. It wouldn't be long before they were on their tail again. Nyx seemed to read his mind. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll figure it out, we always do." Marcus gave her a tight smile, though he couldn't shake the unease that settled in his chest. They had won today, but there were still too many unknowns. Too many enemies, too many questions. As they took off into the sky, leaving the desolate world behind, Marcus sat back in his seat, looking out at the stars. The universe was vast, and the dangers it held were countless. But with Nyx by his side, he felt a sense of determination. They had faced impossible odds and come out on top. And as long as they had each other, he knew they would keep fighting, no matter what came next.